Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'anite.com. Today is Friday the 18th of September 2020, and today I'd like to just run through a bit of a smorgasbord of topics just to sort of bring you up to speed with what's going on my end. Firstly, as you may see, there's been a bit of a technical upgrade. I want the visuals and hopefully the sound as well to be better for the next phase of work. So over the last week or two, I've been getting this stuff, learning how to use it, setting it up, and hopefully it will be improving as time goes on. So that's the first thing. But now getting on to things that I'm sure are closer to home for most people out there, and now with the the lockdowns and the new normals and all the rest of it. We had put our daughter into a school. It was about, I think, halfway through January, something like that. Mainly because we wanted her to have some sort of socialization. And we found a good school in the city that we're in. Well, a good school, insofar as any school is good. It was, it was an okay school and she quite liked it. About a month and a half after that, the whole COVID psychosis began to kick in. So all that to say, she was only there for a couple of months. We've taken her out and we're now homeschooling. There are some real upsides to the homeschooling thing, as I'm sure people are experiencing. One of which is, well, certainly in the country that we live in, you can still legally homeschool without it being a huge problem. I mean, obviously it cuts into your time, but there's just so much stuff online. My daughter, she's coming up for 8. In fact, she's going to be 8 very soon. So what she's very interested in is computer programming. I'm not a computer programmer, but I know enough about it to be able to help her get started. But I've found really excellent courses online, and she's just working her way through those. So she's doing those. She's got courses in Russian, she's got stuff in English. And the upside to it is it means you can stay mobile, and also you don't have to submit your child to a system which is, schools have only ever really been about obedience. When I was growing up, I was born in 1967, so my early school years were sort of in the early 70s. It was all about what they were training you into was being able to put up with boredom for very long periods of time. My primary school was an exception. My primary school was excellent, but we had the system there of middle schools, high schools, comprehensive schools in the United Kingdom. Comprehensive schools were really just basically open prisons for children that had yet to be condemned for any crime. Now, what in the intervening years between when I went to school and not so long ago, schools seem to be pretty much, and it depends a lot on the area that you live in, the kind of school, the kind of parents, but certainly the tendency has been to push what I call the paedophile agenda. When we lived in England, I saw with my own 2 eyes a book at the nursery that our daughter then attended, which was, I think it was called Me and My 2 Daddies, or I Live with 2 Daddies, or something. And I flicked through this book, and it was really selling the virtues of living with 2 men. If you raised an eyebrow about this, then you were straight away put onto some sort of watch list. And I know this for a fact because one of my sisters happens to be a social worker, social engineer, and I asked her if there's a direct link between the nurseries and the social services, and she said yes. So they'll flag you up for whatever it is, hate speech or anti-Semitism, or they actually rang me up because they didn't like the lunches we were giving our daughter at that time. They didn't feel that they were quite the right mixture of proteins and carbohydrates, etc. So that's what it's like. That's what it was like then. It was about control. It was a kind of I suppose very reminded me of the socialist system of indoctrination, where you indoctrinate the teachers, and then the teachers destroy the children. That seemed to be how it works. now what it is, obviously you've got all that and pushing the hashtag insanity, hashtag my feelings agenda, but there's a whole new layer to it now, which is training children into, I suppose, looking at those poor children now all over the world, but they look like they're being trained to go into the gas ovens, quite frankly. They look as though they're being trained to allow themselves to be exterminated. It's a horror story. But anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on that. But clearly we weren't going to allow our daughter to go anywhere near one of these places. They now, in the country that we live in Russia, they make you wear a mask. They make you have your temperature taken by some machine. It's all tied to the banking structure, Sberbank, which is the big bank in this country. It's all tied in with them. And so everybody's basically, well, not everybody, that's not true. People who have to go to work, it seems that they're picking out these people first, making it very difficult for them. They're basically having, even if they're really against it, they're having to put their children in to these places. Anyway, all that to say, we've taken our child out of that system entirely and are homeschooling her, because apart from anything else, I think moving forward, it's going to be quite, it's going to be an advantage to be able to cut and run quite quickly. So there's that. The last few months, for me personally, have been a confirmation of why I've been doing this project, since the beginning of the spending the time with the Qur'an and bringing that into a level of which passed my own standards of due diligence in terms of understanding it and the translation and so on, but also with regard to the God protocol, because I suppose it's bad form to say I told you so. It wasn't, it's not just me. A lot of people saw this coming, but I definitely saw it coming because I'd seen it before. To know the future, you only really have to read a few history books or go and live somewhere. And for me, I'd lived somewhere. I live in Russia, and we've had socialism, and it's not imaginary. It's not like Schindler's List or something. This is real. This was a real genocide, and that happened in this country. And according to Solzhenitsyn, it was around 66 million people murdered by the government, you see. So this, and you can meet anybody. You can go out, I can go out now and talk to people whose parents, grandparents and so on, all either were or knew people who were destroyed by this system, either directly through the gulags or indirectly through things like, catastrophic things like collective farming and all this, and this is socialism. So we've seen socialism before, and now what we've got in the West is this new and improved kind of technicolor socialism. It's still socialism. It still wants to control every single thing that you do, but you have an illusion of choice. It doesn't put a gun to your head. It asks you if you'd like to conform, and then sends you a feedback form. But you're going to do it, and that's how it works. So I didn't know exactly what form it was going to take, and frankly, I was surprised that it took them so long after 9/11. But now here we are. We've got a really good idea of where it's all going. However, for me, these are details. What I'm interested in is the strategy of the big picture, and the big picture is that sure, the satanic system plans. It's got all of its plans, but the principles in the Qur'an are true, and they apply to the ruling elite, the Bill Gateses and all the rest of it, as much as they apply to anyone else. And the shaitan's modus operandi is that he calls you to do something, and then he turns around and disowns you at the last moment. He says, I fear God, and he washes his hands of you. Well, he's going to do that to all the people that are serving him right now. So of course, if it feels a little bit, if you feel vulnerable and all the rest of it, if you're down the bottom of the food chain, as most of us are, compared to the Gateses and the Rockefellers and all these sorts of people, but they plan and God plans, and God is the best of planners. And so, the way I see it, at least, what's actually happening is at this time, all of the strands of all of the themes of all of the topics that we see in the Qur'an, the people of Ad, the people of Thamud, the people of Nuh or Noah, and all of their characteristic representative sins are now, I hate the word, but globalized. They've been universalized, And what we have now is a single community which speaks one language, essentially. That language is English. And now we are one world community. And so the way that I've seen this, knowing where this was going and thinking to myself, why would I be doing what I'm doing? The only reason that I would made the choices that I've made over the last 10 years is because I knew we were going somewhere like this. I knew that the tyranny that they had planned, I didn't know the details, but I knew roughly what it was going to look like, because I'd actually caught the tail end of one. And also I'd seen what happened in my own country going back. If you don't live in a country, you keep going back every 5 or 10 years, you see how brainwashed people are. It's stunning. I knew that there would be no escape from this, and I also knew that this new tyranny was going to be total. It was going to be total, and it was going to be so perfect that people would beg for it. They would actually beg for it. Well, if that's the case, and this isn't an original thought. If you read people, for example, Aldous Huxley, he talks about this, about developing the perfect system of tyranny, whereby the slaves actually want it. I mean, if you read Brave New World, that's basically how that is. In this system, I knew that there would be no way out, and it meant that there would be no further generation. If you've read George Orwell's 1984, which he was going to call The Last Man, which is an interesting title, the publisher sort of persuaded him to call it 1984. But Winston Smith is the last man. And in fact, if you read Brave New World, John, the character of John, he's also the last surviving man in this system, a genuine human being. The reason why I mentioned that is because I could see that the system they were rolling out was so perfect, having seen my entire family utterly brainwashed by this system, thinking that they are somehow original and progressive, when what they are is orthodox to the core. This was different to Russian socialism. Under Russian socialism, you see, what you had was a situation where at work everyone was мы все за, we're all for the party. But at home, in the kitchen, away from all of that influence, it was different. People were different. People had completely different views. They had their personal views. If you read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, then one of the characters, I think his name was Wemmick, he has his office thoughts, but if you go and visit him at home, he's got a completely different set of views. This is different. This is different under this new perfected sort of eco-pedo socialism, is that people don't have any other points of view. Almost, they're what they say at work is what they think. They're not capable of any other thought. And so, why I started this project was because I realised that this is the last generation. There isn't going to be another generation of people who can think. This is the last. If this protocol is ever to work, and if you don't know what I'm talking about in this, you'll sort of have to look at some more of my work, and I will make new videos as going forward. But this protocol of warning, which is found within the Qur'an, of warning the elite in order to for the punishments of God to become binding, it, crazy though it sounds and horrific though it is, it seems and now seems, all the more so, the only rational response to a situation where the alternative is what is, again, well, to quote Orwell, a boot stamping into a human face forever. Well, I don't accept that as a reasonable way of moving forward. However, what I'm seeing is that there are people out there now either previously awake or now waking up, and what they really want is they want to go back to how it was before. They want it, how it was pre-COVID. What they can't kind of understand, unfortunately, is that what they had pre-COVID was also the same system. It's just all that's happened is that system is owned, and all that's happened is they crossed over the line from one state line to the next state within the same plantation. So nothing really has changed. All that to say that for me, I can see the only actual solution is execution of the protocol found in the Qur'an by which the elite are held to account. It's not that all elites are bad, we shouldn't have an elite. Every iceberg has a pinnacle. It's just unavoidable. To say that it shouldn't be, it couldn't be, or wouldn't be an elite is irrational, it's illogical, and it's not possible. Of course there's going to be an elite. I don't have a problem with there being an elite. What should happen is the elite should do its job. And what's happened is that the elite have seen an opportunity to break their contract with the people that they rule, and we are ruled. And they've broken that contract, and they think that they can get away with it. And absent execution of the protocol that we find in the Qur'an, I would say they're correct. They usually are correct. They're certainly correct in their analysis. They know, and they're right, that most people are never going to wake up, and they also know that it doesn't matter if they do, and they're right on both counts. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What I'm looking for and what I'm interested in is the ultimate leverage, and that seems to me to be the only strategy worth pursuing. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. All that to say, as part of my editing, my endless editing process, and one of the reasons why I'm so particular about it is because this final work is actually going to constitute part of this protocol to the elite. I'm really doing it for them. I mean, I'm glad if former Muslims or interested people and all that read what I'm doing, but fundamentally I'm creating a legal document in order to execute on this protocol. But as a part of my editing, I've read, just as part of the last stage of this, of going through the Qur'an, a complete revelation, prior to the final edit, I've read the text through out loud, slowly, twice, making minor corrections and punctuations and so on. And something struck me that I hadn't seen before, is how much you see, I've been very focused on executing on the protocol to hold the ruling elite to account, and in order for the punishments of God to become binding. But what I hadn't seen before, but it struck me recently, is that each of these protocols, for each of the communities, the people of Noah, the people of Lot, the people of Ad, of Thamud, etc., 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 these are really precursors to the Day of Judgment. I mean, it's a bit difficult for us to see past, total annihilation, but we should, because this isn't the reality. Their tyranny isn't the reality, and even the protocol and the execution of this protocol isn't the reality. What is the reality is what we find once we cross over the state line, as it were, into eternity. That's the reality. And all of this is, as the Qur'an calls it, the enjoyment of delusion. That's all it is. It seems very real. It seems very difficult, and we get very close with it. But over and over again, I saw that the interweaved nature of descriptions of particular communities, then an appeal to the heavens and the earth as proofs, and then it says these are the proofs of God, the proofs of God, the proofs of God, and it said most men do not understand. And most men do not understand. I have a hard time understanding it. It's a difficult thing to cast your hook into the Day of Judgment, hook it in there, and realize that that's the true reality. And everything that we've got now, everything that, because it's personal, it seems real, it's very difficult to see that that's the actual thing. So the reason why I'm saying all this is because we've got to get, what I'm doing and what I advise other people to try to do is to see beyond COVID, beyond, the Gatesian, Orwellian tyranny, beyond all of this stuff. It's not to become passive. I'm not arguing for that. I'm arguing for and it's not about, sort of everyone joining together and singing Kumbaya and, drinking a Diet Pepsi and everything's going to be fine. No. From the Quranic point of view, everything that we're experiencing right now is really just a vapor. And where we're going is to the actual reality. And so I'd say let's hold on to that, and to sort of start with that, and then kind of work backwards, as it were. So those are my main thoughts today. I don't want to make a very long video because I'm not quite sure how this new camera, how long it's going to last. I'm still waiting for another bit to turn up so that I can make it record for longer. I have any idea how long it's been recording. 20 minutes. Yeah, okay. I think I've got a bit more. I wanted to talk a little bit about eschatologies. Eschatologies are really, I suppose, formal myths around the end of the world. And quite a lot of people have this thing, well, maybe Muhammad was right about this. Well, when they say Muhammad, what they're talking about is the hadith. Maybe the hadith are right about this or right about that. That the Dajjal or whatever it is, your favorite hadith on about the end of the world. And my thought on that is that the Qur'an is very clear that Muhammad didn't know anything about this. He didn't know anything about the Day of Judgment, and that's the first point. And the second point is that it's going to come suddenly. It's going to come suddenly. My good friend and brother Sayyid sent me a verse the other morning, which is 54:50, which he just sent me in the Arabic, but and our command is only as it's just one command, and which is like the blink of an eye. So that's when the command of God comes, the end comes as a blink of an eye. So all of these eschatologies about the Dajjal and this, that, and so on. Certainly, there are mythologies about the end of the world. The Christians have a whole load. But the Qur'an is very clear that Muhammad didn't know any of this. And so looking for the signs of this, that, and the other, I stick to what is within the Qur'an. And what I do know is that when it comes instantaneously. So it's not like there's some big build up to this thing. Or it's just that it comes like that. Now, we have warnings. The Qur'an is it's jam-packed with warnings, but one of its warnings is that when it comes like that, and there's no return. So this is what I'm staying focused on. I know it sounds it sounds horrific, and it is horrific. If you're not terrified by it, I think you really haven't given it enough thought. But to me, this seems, unfortunately, the only reasonable response to a situation in which the ruling elite correctly understand that they can manipulate and drive the herd into a new plantation where there will be no men, no humans, no genuine humans left. And if that's the future of a sort of transsexualized, transhumanist kind of a hive mind with no soul, then I think we have no alternative. I have no alternative but to execute on this protocol, horrific though it is, because the alternative is worse. So, in conclusion, waiting for people to wake up is futile. It's not only futile; it's divisive and somewhat silly. We're trained to think of the future. We've trained in the past, rather, to think that that the majority. We're trained in this. We're trained to believe that the majority view is important. The more people who agree with you, the more right you are. But this is not the Quranic way. The Quranic way is actually the inverse of that. If you read the Quran with an engaged brain, I'd hard pressed to think of a situation in which lots of people turned around and said, yeah, this is a really good idea. I suppose you have the Prophet Yunus, 100,000 people or more repented. That's a big score. But generally speaking, if you take, for example, Noah, it's just him and a few believers. Even his own son rejected. Generally speaking, this is the situation. It's a very, very small number of people. The majority of men, they do not understand, they will not think, and this is just the situation. So, and even if they did, what do they want? What people want, they wanted to go back to pre-COVID. What they can't understand is that everything they had pre-COVID, all of the, the feminism and all of the hashtagism and all of the, the so-called freedoms and all of this stuff, all of the, everyone's just the same, and women are all amazing, and they can all be, physicists and engineers, and having to believe things which are palpably not true, but sound good. I agree, they do sound good. They sound good. They, sugar plum fairies and all this. They sound fine, but they're not true. All of that was the preparation for this. All of the loss of logic was preparation for this. So where we were before wasn't real either. This isn't real. But where they're taking us is going to be really, really harsh. These are just, the little pieces of cheese leading us into the mousetrap. Right, I just got interrupted by a telephone call. In summary, if you're still waiting for people to wake up, or you think that, this is going to turn around, it isn't. It's just going to get worse. And that's because the same plan that brought us up to February 2020 over the last 150 years is just continuing. It's just that the prison was more acceptable. It was an open prison up till that point. It was, the velvet glove was on the iron fist up to that point. But now that the velvet fist is coming off, and people are being divided along their lines of how they respond, whether they worship the state or not. And so for me, I'm not waiting for it to go back to anything, because I don't like that either. And it was that brought us to this point. So for me, I've chosen where I want to go and chosen my line. I suggest people, think carefully about what they want, because however harsh this seems, this is not reality. However harsh this seems, this is the enjoyment of delusion. However harsh this seems, where we're actually going is either to the fire or to the garden. Read the Qur'an. I'm not saying you read my translation. Any translation doesn't really matter. I mean, even the traditionalists can't really mess this up too much. If you read with an engaged mind, especially if you read in English and you read translations which have got a lot of parentheses, just skip the parentheses, just pick up the main parts, and read about the destruction of the various types of people, and then see that you'll find quite close by appeals to the heavens and the earth, to proofs that we can see, all of us can see with our eyes, and then appeals to the day of judgment. Decide where you're going. I mean, for me, even if it went back, even if COVID disappeared and our prison warders decided that they were going to be nice to us from now on, for me, it doesn't make any difference. We still live, and then we die, and then we have the judgment. So in a way, for me, the whole COVID thing, it does make any difference. I'm glad I've had the opportunity to see this coming, to live at this particular time. If I hadn't lived at a time as efficiently evil as this, I wouldn't have chosen this path. I wouldn't have. I'm not that brave. So that's just, I'm just here clearing the decks of quite a few subjects that have been rattling around in my mind while I've been doing the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to leave it there. I hope everyone's well, and that's all for now. If you're listening to YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop-down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an-alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop-down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short. Eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.